Hello and welcome to all our viewers. The whole world is facing an unprecedented economic, medical and humanitarian crisis of the coronavirus pandemic. Economies are shattered and more damage is yet to come. Everyone is looking for a solution. At this critical juncture, what is the option before world economies? How deep is the crisis and is there any solution at all? To discuss all that and much more, today we are joined by Dr. Geeta Gopinath, Chief Economist of the International Monetary Fund. Thanks for talking to us, Dr. Gopinath. And first of all, what is your assessment of the economic fallout of coronavirus crisis? And sitting there in US, how do you see the post-coronavirus world?
So this is a crisis like no other, and we just came out with a report on the impact on the global economy. We're projecting a recession in the global economy of -3%. So this would make it the worst recession since the global depression. So the Great Depression, it's much worse than the global financial crisis, where growth overall fell by about 0.1%. The second thing that's important to note is that this is a truly global crisis, which means that advanced economies and emerging and developing economies are all being hit very hard by this crisis. And a third point I want to make is that, while we have growth at -3% for 2020, we do have a recovery for 2021. However, that is a partial recovery. So the effects of this crisis will weigh on countries and on the global economy for well into 2021.
And I'll come to latest news now, Dr. Gopinath. One of the fallout was the recent oil shock. Well, the oil prices went negative. Do you see it getting repeated again?
So what we're seeing, Sumit, is two phenomena. One, of course, is the very large collapse in demand for oil. As you've seen, transportation basically come to a halt everywhere in the world. Demand is collapsing for oil. And on the other hand, there's been a turbulent OPEC plus relationship. And so the combination of that has generated a situation where the supply of oil is just so much in excess of the demand, is leading to storage problems. And so you see phenomena that we haven't seen in our lifetime, which is negative prices for oil futures and even for oil spot prices in the US. I think what we can say for sure is that this uncertainty and the volatility around oil will continue for the next several months. Now, if you look at maybe a year going into the next year, we have oil prices coming back up to our forecast is for oil per barrel to be about $35 for 2020 and 2021. But again, just as this crisis is so unpredictable and so uncertain, and so much depends upon the pandemic and how the containment measures work and whether 2020 is a time for recovery, all of that again weighs on the oil market and the impact on oil prices.
And will there be an existential crisis for the oil-dependent Gulf economies and many Latin American nations as well? Will they look at changing their growth models now and from oil-dependent economy to maybe de-risking to other types of economic growth?
For countries that rely on oil exports, these are doubly difficult times. So they're dealing both with a health crisis, a financial crisis, but then also a very important source of external revenue that comes, a dollar revenue that comes from exporting oil. That's been very badly hit. And this, even if prices come back up, nobody is projecting the prices that we saw before the virus. So this is what we would call a permanent shock. And countries need to adjust to this kind of a permanent shock. This is going to have implications in terms of their fiscal situation, but also this is the time for countries to diversify away from it. I mean, the world is in what we call a great lockdown. That's the name we're giving at the IMF to this current crisis. And while we're in this great lockdown, we are going to see countries that rely on sectors like tourism, on transportation, countries that rely on oil exports. All of these are going to be very badly hit.
And coming to India, and you have projected 1.9% GDP growth for Indian economy. Aren't you too optimistic about the growth of Indian economy? And have you taken into account the extension of lockdown that happened the day last week when you announced the GDP forecast?
So let me just be clear about the numbers. So 1.9% represents our number for the fiscal year of 2021. If we were talking about the calendar year, which is what every other number for other countries refers to, on a calendar year basis, our growth for India is 0.5%. So it is a substantial slowdown for a country that's expected to grow at 6.5%. Coming down to 0.5% is a big hit. When your question about the extension of the lockdown, so in fact, when we created our forecast, we worked on the assumption that the lockdown would be extended. So in that sense, we already have that in our baseline. Now, that said, I think there is a lot of uncertainty how intensive the lockdown will be, how long this containment period will continue, the implications for different activities. So just as it's the case for many other countries in the world, I think downside risks to our forecasts are high.
And Indian Central Bank has taken a number of steps since the lockdown started. Twice it has reduced key interest rates. Do you think it's enough to bring the liquidity into the economy to infuse as they are hoping with these steps?
It's not just that they've cut interest rates, which of course helps, but I think the other measures that they've taken in terms of providing liquidity through these long-term refinancing operations, that's one big measure they've taken. They've also are trying to help both borrowers and lenders. So, there's loan forbearance for borrowers and then some regulatory retrieval for creditors. And at the same time, they're trying to get credit to reach the MSME sector. So, all these other pieces of the interventions that they have done would certainly help the economy.
And as we were talking from the last few days, something happened over the weekend. India has revised the FDI policy and China has opposed it. Do you think India is currently right in doing that, or will India get hurt by this step?
Well, Smith, I don't want to talk about any particular country's policies on this matter. Our view, of course, is that this is a time when countries, of course, have to take care of the health crisis at home. And that is their number one priority, and protecting their people and their firms. These are important aspects of it. But we are very clear that it's very important that the world does not become protectionist or doesn't deglobalize. And again, I'm not talking about any particular move by any country. I'm just talking about the more general, principle that we have to make sure that we don't move to a situation where the world deglobalizes, because there have been lots of productivity gains that have come around from countries engaging in global trade and global capital flows, and we should maintain that.
An Indian government has also taken steps for poor. 1.7 lakh crore rupees of package has been announced. Do you think is it enough, or you think more should be done for the poor of the country?
So we certainly welcome the measures the government has done on the fiscal side in terms of targeted transfers, both in-kind and cash transfers to low-income households, and also to help, pay the wages of low-income workers. Our view is that more can be done, that there's a scope to do more, given the scale of the crises. More should be done, and I would expect that the Indian government will be doing more in the coming days.
And also another stimulus package is being talked about in India. If that comes, what is your expectation? How should that go?
Again, so I think when you're thinking about the stimulus, you have to think about the priorities for the country. The number one priority is on the health sector and on saving people's lives. And for that will require spending both on medical facilities, protective equipment, testing. More generally, this is not just for now, but in the medium term and the long term, India needs to do a lot of investment in its health capacity, and this would be a good place to spend money. The second aspect is on helping the people who've lost their jobs because of this crisis, no fault of theirs, firms that are not getting customers anymore, again, because of the great lockdown that the world is in. And to support both of them should be another priority for the government. All of this will imply large fiscal spending. So it's also very important to be transparent about where the money is being spent, and as we say, to keep the receipts. And the third big block is on monetary policy and RBI policy in terms of providing liquidity, loan forbearance. And again, there you might have to keep in mind that regulation and supervision should also be paying close attention to what's happening with non-performing loans and its kind.
And IMF's $1 trillion lending capacity is quite substantial, and you have approved 25 countries the overall loans for them as well. So do you need more resources now, or is that enough, whatever is with you?
So it's a substantial capacity that we have of $1 trillion. And we have very quickly moved on several forms of financing. So we have what we call rapid financing, which comes with very little conditions. We've also provided debt relief to our poorest members. We're putting in a short-term liquidity line also for countries that are well managed and have sound macro policies. So there are many policies that are being rolled out. As things stand, we feel well resourced. But again, there is a lot of uncertainty about the duration of this crisis. The duration lasts for much longer, goes into 2021. Then our projections are for global growth to fall by another 3 percentage points in 2020. So, those would be very, very large numbers. And then, the prospects of a recovery in 2021 would also dim considerably. So we'll have to see, like every country in the world and every policy maker in the world who has to follow this crisis very, very closely, given how the speed with which things have changed, the magnitude of the shock that's hitting these countries. In line with that, policymakers, and including the IMF, will have to respond with speed and with size, and also very quickly recalibrate depending upon what the data looks like.
Last few questions, Dr. Gopinath, and you have already said that the recession post-coronavirus pandemic is going to be worse than the recession of 1930s and even 2008 and 9. So what are the lessons learned and mistakes that can be avoided for a quick recovery from this recession? The Great Lockdown is worse than the global financial crisis, but not as bad as the Great Depression. So the Great Depression, global growth fell by about 10 percentage points between 1929 and 1932, and we have 3%. So it's not as severe as that, which is why we say it's the worst recession since the Great Depression. The lessons that we have learned also from the Great Depression is the need for very quick response on the monetary policy side, the lender of last resort, ensuring sufficient liquidity in the economy. These are, policy mistakes of the past that are not being done now, and people are responding very quickly to it. Similarly, I think the lesson learned from the global financial crisis is to do things very quickly. And the scale of public intervention that we have seen around the world, especially in some major advanced economies, is really unprecedented. And I think that's because of lessons learned from the past. And how's life there in the US, and how has your routine changed post-coronavirus pandemic?
So, in the U.S. is still in a lockdown with differential degrees of it in different states, but we're all, all of us at IMF are working from home. So this is really a unique experience. I think it's once in a lifetime for all of us, for you and for me and for everybody. I think this is also the busiest time for us at the IMF, because we have over 100 countries that have approached us for financing, and we are involved with giving policy advice. And we're doing, usually in the past, we would be flying to countries and doing the advice in person and negotiating in person, but we're all doing this now remotely, and even with our colleagues, we're doing all of this remotely. So this is a unique challenge, but I think more than us, my appreciation is for the doctors and the nurses and the first responders and the police who are at the front line here with this and are dealing with this in terms of a life and death situation.
All right, one last question, and if you can answer this question, as we know that a few hours ago, Donald Trump has now said that they can temporarily suspend immigration to US. Do you think protectionism will take over the world, or economic nationalism? Is it a danger for the world economy as well?
So, but again, I don't want to comment on any particular announcement that's been made. I mean, we don't respond to political announcements, so I'm not going to do that. But the broader theme of ensuring that there is, that the world doesn't deglobalize in the medium term is very important for the global economy.
Well, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your giving time to us. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Sumit.
So today we were talking to Dr. Geeta Gopinath, Chief Economist of the International Monetary Fund. She was talking on a host of issues. Definitely the economic damage from the coronavirus is going to be severe, including for the economies, including India as well. And in India, the growth projections could be revised also. Overall, the economies of the world should be ready for taking this damage from the coronavirus pandemic. That's all from my side. Have a good day.